In the early 17th century, the Spanish Empire was the unrivaled master of the seas. Gold and silver flowed from the New World into the coffers of Madrid, enriching kings and funding vast armies. For decades, Spain seemed untouchable, its mighty galleons patrolling the oceans and its colonies growing fat on wealth. But Spain's enemies, England, France, and the Dutch, saw an opportunity. If they could not destroy Spain on the battlefield, they would bleed her dry on the high seas. From this brutal struggle emerged a new breed of men, the privateers, pirates in all but name, licensed by their governments to plunder Spain's treasure routes. And among these men, none would rise higher or strike more terror than Sir Henry Morgan. The making of a pirate. Henry Morgan was born around 1635 in Wales. His early life is shrouded in mystery. Some claim he was the son of a farmer, a restless boy who preferred a sword to a plow. Others whisper he was indentured and sold into servitude in the Caribbean, working off years of hard labor before seizing his freedom. What we know for certain is this: by his early 20s, Morgan was in the West Indies and he had found his calling. At that time, England's Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell sought to drive Spain from the Caribbean. Armies were dispatched to seize Spanish possessions, and fleets of privateers were unleashed to raid the enemy's trade routes. Morgan joined this world of sanctioned piracy, where bravery, cruelty, and cunning were often the only paths to survival. He learned the trade quickly: how to command men hardened by the sea, how to strike fear into enemies, and most importantly, how to get rich. By the mid-1660s, Morgan had allied himself with Sir Thomas Modiford, the governor of Jamaica. Officially, Modiford was supposed to keep the pirates under control. In reality, he unleashed them against Spain whenever England's economy needed a boost. And Henry Morgan was his most effective weapon. The road to Portobello by 1668. Tensions between England and Spain were at a breaking point. Rumors of a Spanish invasion of Jamaica spread like wildfire. Modiford issued Morgan his orders: raid the Spanish, gather intelligence, and cripple their power. Morgan did not hesitate. He assembled a fleet of 10 ships and 500 hardened buccaneers. Their target, Portobello, in modern-day Panama. Why Portobello? Because it was one of the most important treasure ports in the Spanish Empire. Every year, caravans of silver from Peru and gold from the Andes passed through Portobello, guarded by castles and soldiers. Attacking it was madness, which is exactly why Morgan chose it. The raid on Portobello was defended by 2 massive castles at the harbor's entrance and a 3rd fortress in the town's center. Any ordinary captain would have been deterred. But Morgan was not ordinary. First, he landed his men out of sight and marched them through the jungle, bypassing the harbor defenses. At dawn, the buccaneers stormed the first castle, catching the defenders off guard. The Spanish fought desperately, but Morgan's men overwhelmed them. The second castle fell soon after, but the 3rd fortress at the heart of the city posed a greater challenge. It was heavily garrisoned, and Morgan's men were exhausted, outnumbered, and losing morale. Some whispered of retreat. Morgan needed a plan, and he devised one as bold as it was ruthless. The human shields, the 17th century historian Alexandre Echemelin, who sailed with Morgan, claimed the buccaneer kidnapped priests and nuns from the city and used them as human shields, forcing them to carry ladders against the fortress walls while his men climbed behind. The Spanish defenders hesitated, unwilling to fire upon holy men and women. Morgan's plan worked. His men stormed the fortress, broke through the defenses, and slaughtered the garrison. By nightfall, Portobello was his, a city held hostage. For a month, Morgan and his buccaneers occupied Portobello. The people of the city endured unspeakable suffering. Morgan held the town for ransom, demanding 350,000 pieces of eight to spare what was left. He stripped the city of treasure, tortured prisoners to reveal hidden wealth, and forced families to hand over every coin of silver. Exquemelin wrote of horrors, looting, rapes, beatings. But many historians believe he exaggerated. Having developed a personal hatred for Morgan, still there is no doubt that the raid was savage, and that Morgan and his men left Portobello far poorer than they found it. When Morgan finally departed, he sailed back to Jamaica with immense wealth. In England, his exploits were celebrated. Pamphlets hailed him as a hero striking at Spain's tyranny. To the Spanish, however, he was a devil in human form, disaster and opportunity. Morgan's fame grew. Soon he planned his next great strike, an assault on Cartagena de Indias, one of the richest cities of the Spanish Main. With the support of Governor Modiford, he gathered ships and men, bolstered by new recruits eager to share in the plunder. But fate intervened. At a war council aboard the English ship Oxford, Morgan met with his captains to plan the Cartagena raid. Suddenly, a spark ignited the gunpowder stores. A deafening explosion tore the ship apart. 200 men were killed instantly. Morgan was thrown into the water and barely survived. Half his leadership was gone and his flagship was destroyed. The Cartagena raid had to be abandoned, but Morgan was not one to give up. With his remaining men, he turned his sights elsewhere, toward the rich but vulnerable settlements around Lake Maracaibo. The Maracaibo raid Maracaibo, on the coast of Venezuela, lay behind a narrow channel guarded by Spanish forts. Morgan approached cautiously, but when he entered, he found the first fortifications deserted. The Spanish had abandoned them, leaving only a fuse connected to powder kegs, a trap meant to destroy the invaders. Fortunately, Morgan's men discovered it in time. Inside Maracaibo, the buccaneers plundered everything in sight. Houses were ransacked, families tortured until they revealed their hidden valuables, and entire communities reduced to ruin. Escapees fled into the jungle, but Morgan's men hunted many of them down. For 5 days, Morgan ruled Maracaibo, indulging in drinking, revelry, and cruelty. Exquemelin again described scenes of barbarity, though, as with Portobello, some historians believe he exaggerated. But Morgan's true challenge came not within Maracaibo, but at its exit, trapped by the Spanish. When Morgan attempted to leave, he discovered that the Spanish had returned in force. At the narrow passage out of the lagoon, 2 squadrons of Spanish warships, the Armada de Barlovento, awaited him. Their combined guns numbered over 126 cannons, more than enough to annihilate Morgan's fleet. The Spanish commander, Don Alonso del Espinosa, demanded Morgan surrender, abandon his loot and slaves, and leave empty-handed. For once, it seemed Morgan's luck had run out, but Morgan never surrendered. The fire ship in council with his captains, Morgan proposed a daring plan. They would prepare a fire ship, an empty vessel packed with pitch, tar, and explosives, set ablaze, and sent straight into the heart of the Spanish line. The chosen target was Espinosa's flagship, the Magdalena. On the appointed night, the fire ship sailed silently into the harbor, its dummy figures on deck making it seem fully crewed. As it struck the Magdalena, grappling hooks tangled the ships together. Flames engulfed both vessels. Spanish sailors screamed as the blaze spread to nearby ships. Panic erupted. The once formidable Spanish fleet descended into chaos. Morgan's men seized the moment, attacking in force. The Magdalena was destroyed, other ships scattered, and the blockade broken. Against overwhelming odds, Morgan had escaped, with all his loot intact. The pirate king of the Caribbean, by the time Morgan returned to Jamaica, he was unimaginably wealthy. The plunder of Maracaibo alone was estimated at 250,000 pesos, along with cattle, slaves, and valuables beyond count. To the Spanish, Morgan was now the most dangerous enemy in the Caribbean. To the English, he was a national hero, a man who humiliated Spain again and again. His reputation as the pirate king of the Caribbean was cemented. But Henry Morgan's greatest raid, the one that would make him a legend, was yet to come, and it would take him to the very heart of Spain's empire in the New World, the city of Panama. When Henry Morgan returned from Maracaibo in triumph, the Caribbean buzzed with his name. He was no longer just a pirate or privateer. To the Spanish, he was the scourge of the seas, a wolf devouring their empire. To the English, he was a living legend, a man who struck at Spain where few dared. But Morgan was not finished. His eyes now turned to the ultimate prize, Panama City. The road to Panama by 1670, England and Spain were officially at peace. But treaties meant little in the Caribbean, where old grudges ran deep. Governor Thomas Modiford, Morgan's patron, quietly encouraged another raid. The wealth of Panama, silver from Peru, gold from Chile, pearls from the Pacific flowed through the city before being shipped to Spain. Seizing it would be a blow from which Spain might never recover. Morgan gathered a fleet of 30 ships and nearly 2,000 buccaneers, the largest force he had ever commanded. His army was a motley brotherhood, English, French, Dutch, freebooters of every kind, united by greed and hatred of Spain. In December 1670, they set sail for Panama. Through the jungle, Morgan's men landed near the mouth of the Chagres River, capturing a Spanish fort after a bloody skirmish. From there, they began a brutal march inland, through swamps, dense jungle, and treacherous terrain. The journey tested even the hardest buccaneers. Supplies quickly ran out. Men grew weak with hunger, gnawing on leather straps or boiling grass for soup. Fever claimed many lives. Yet Morgan drove them on with iron determination, promising them riches beyond imagination. The Spanish governor of Panama knew they were coming. He sent 2,500 soldiers to stop them, supported by cavalry and even trained bulls meant to scatter the enemy ranks. When the two forces clashed, it was chaos. Muskets cracked, swords clashed, and smoke filled the battlefield. The bulls, panicked by gunfire, turned back and trampled their own soldiers. The Spanish line broke. Morgan's buccaneers surged forward, ruthless and unstoppable. The road to Panama lay open. The burning of Panama City on January 28, 1671. Morgan's army reached Old Panama City. The Spanish governor ordered the city set ablaze rather than let it fall intact. Flames roared through the streets, devouring churches, warehouses, and homes. By nightfall, much of the once great city was reduced to smoking ruins. But what the fire spared, Morgan's men seized. For 3 weeks, the buccaneers plundered what they could: gold, silver, jewels, silks, slaves. Some accounts claim the loot reached as much as 400,000 pesos. Though the exact figure remains disputed, Exquemelin, the chronicler who despised Morgan, painted a grim picture of cruelty, torture of prisoners, starvation of captives, and endless drunken revelry among the ruins. Whether exaggerated or not, the raid confirmed Morgan's reputation as both genius and monster. By the time he withdrew, Panama lay shattered. The proud jewel of Spain's American empire had been reduced to ash. Triumph and trouble, Morgan returned to Jamaica a hero to his men, but his timing was disastrous. England and Spain had signed a peace treaty months earlier. His sack of Panama was technically an act of piracy, and the Spanish crown demanded justice. Governor Modiford was arrested and shipped to London in disgrace. Soon after, Morgan himself was summoned. Many thought he would face trial, or even execution, for his audacity. But fate smiled on him once again. A knight of the realm. In London, Morgan was not condemned, but celebrated. His raids had humiliated Spain and filled English coffers. The people saw him not as a criminal, but as a national hero. King Charles II himself knighted him in 1674, granting him the title Sir Henry Morgan. Soon after, Morgan was sent back to Jamaica, not as a pirate, but as deputy governor. It was a stunning reversal of fortune. The scourge of the Spanish Main was now the law. Governor of Jamaica as deputy governor, Morgan traded his cutlass for a judge's gavel. He worked to suppress the very pirates he had once led, enforcing England's laws and stabilizing Jamaica's economy. Yet Morgan never lost his love of drink and revelry. He lived like a king, with plantations, slaves, and vast wealth at his command. He grew fat, his once lean frame swelling from years of feasting. Still, his shadow loomed over the Caribbean. To the Spanish, the name Morgan remained a curse. To the English, he was proof that boldness and cunning could topple even the mightiest empire. The final years by the 1680s, Morgan's health began to fail. Years of heavy drinking left him ravaged by liver disease. In 1688, he died at the age of about 53. He was buried with full honors at Palisado's Cemetery in Port Royal, the richest city of the Caribbean. Cannons thundered as the great privateer was laid to rest. But fate had one last twist. On June 7, 1692, a massive earthquake struck Jamaica. Much of Port Royal sank beneath the sea, including Palisado's Cemetery. Morgan's grave was swallowed by the waves, his body lost forever. The man who had lived by the sea returned to it in death. The legend of Henry, Morgan Henry. Morgan left behind more than wealth and power. He left a legacy of contradictions. To the Spanish, he was a butcher, a thief, a demon in human form. To the English, he was a patriot, a knight, a man who dared to challenge the greatest empire of his age. To his men, he was both leader and rival, a figure of admiration and resentment. History remembers him as both pirate and governor, both destroyer and builder. Few men have lived such a double life, celebrated as a hero by one nation, cursed as a villain by another. and in popular imagination, his name has never died. Today, Captain Morgan lives on not only in history books, but in rum bottles across the world, a fitting tribute to a man who loved both the sea and his drink. Closing reflection. Sir Henry Morgan's life was a storm, fueled by ambition, greed, and ruthless cunning. He rose from obscurity to command fleets, topple cities, and bend the Caribbean to his will. He was, in many ways, the last great buccaneer, standing between the lawless age of piracy and the dawning age of empires. Love him or hate him, fear him or praise him, Henry Morgan remains what he always was, a legend of the seas,